Hi, everyone. I'm so excited for one of our last panels of the year. So crazy, I know. My name is Desanka Illick, and I am the Director of Partnerships here at the Conversationalist. We are the go-to destination for Gen Z, if you don't already know us, and we do that through our social media platform and through our online community app. So if you already aren't part of our community, you can join right now. All you have to do is text Unify to 1-877-222-119 to join our community. I already see some awesome community members in the chat. See Taylor, Andy, Rena. We got the whole crew here. It is so awesome. So excited. So yeah, today is going to be a great conversation, and let's get started and start introducing our panelists. First up is Travis Jordan Harley. Travis Jordan used performing as a medium for activism and continues to this day, but at the start of college got directly involved with social change. Since then, Z has been associated with the Conversationalist, joined campus groups such as the Black Student Union, Iris Alliance, mentoring programs, and has raised money for organizations that cater to social justice. Z tries to raise awareness on gender, race, sexuality, mental health, and class issues through protest, fundraisers, discussion, and any other way Z can. So let's introduce Travis. Awesome. Up next, Zoe Stoller is a professional writer and digital marketer who is passionate about self-love, pride, and individuality. They love to share their unique journey within the LGBTQ+ and mental health spheres and educate their community in order to inspire them to be their fullest, most authentic selves. Welcome, Zoe. Safa Chauhan has been in the gender equity space for almost 3 years now, from looking at global issues to ones in her own community. Through co-starting a menstrual equity organization to starting a Girl Up campaign club, Safa has been very involved in all things gender equity. She's also passionate about working towards equal rights. Yay! Faisal Halabea is a student at Boston University, where he serves as the co-president of BU chapter of HeForShe. He's a student of physics, math, and the liberal arts. He's both Finnish and Palestinian and grew up in Singapore. Awesome. Julia Esposito is a junior studying physics and astronomy at the University of Pennsylvania. She is an avid reader and writer with a tea obsession. Other than school, she is involved in a variety of clubs and is very passionate about having important conversations. Sid Mark is a 17-year-old transgender person from Wheaton, Illinois. From speaking at multiple progressive churches to creating an LGBTQ+ roundtable for queer students to voice the realities of discrimination at his high school, he has a strong passion for queer justice. Sid has developed a strong passion for decolonizing gender by creating educational pathways for acceptance and celebration of the LGBTQ+ community. As a panelist tonight, he hopes to showcase the realities of the gender spectrum. Haley Tyson is a graduating senior at UNC Chapel Hill studying business and economics. Currently, she serves as the external president for Period at UNC. Period at UNC is a student organization focused on increasing menstrual health equity and removing the stigma surrounding menstruation through service advocacy and education. And last but not least, Grant Loveless is an award-winning AfroQueer student leader and social entrepreneur. As an Austin teen and creative, he seeks to create spaces that empower and uplift BIPOC and LGBTQ+ students and youth. Awesome. Great. And for the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm going to introduce our guest host along these incredibly inspiring panelists. And she is an actress and writer from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, who you may know from Hacking High School, That's the Gag, and Blood Queens. She began her career on the musical theater stage as young as 5 years old, leading her to study literature and theater professionally in college. And while getting her degree, she started her successful YouTube channel, allowing her to still pursue her creativity throughout academic endeavors. And she's very passionate about our topic of gender equity tonight. So let's get into it and introduce our guest host, Alessandra DeMartino. Awesome. So this is to the point where I will hand the mic to Alessandra and let her take it away. So awesome. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh my gosh, thank you for such an intro. First of all, hello everybody. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Alessandra DeMartino. I'm really excited to kick off the panel about gender equity. And yeah, let's get started. So it is great to meet all of you. Sorry, I'm reading off the thing. I'm a little nervous. It's great to meet all of you. Without further ado, we can get into the discussion. By definition, we all know that gender equity is the process of being fair to both men and women. Julia, do you think that gender equity leads to equality, and why?
Well, I think equity and equality are specifically like different things. And so equity is more about making sure everyone has equal opportunity, whereas equality means being on the same like outcome. And so I feel like in a way they're separate. And so gender equity instead would just, I guess, lead to gender equity, or like that's kind of like the end goal in a way. But that's kind of how I see it. So.
That's a really good point, because I think a lot of the times people just kind of blend the two together and it's like, wait, they're very, very different things. So thank you for that analysis. So Faisal, am I saying your name right? Okay, thank you. Do you think there's a lack of gender equity in the United States? And if so, why?
Yeah, I would say there is. I mean, I think as Julia rightly pointed out, there's a difference between equity and equality. And right now, if we're looking at equity in the United States, I think that there are just different opportunities available to people based on their gender and how they identify. And these are kind of, honestly, some of them are very obvious. Some of them are a little bit less so. And I'd say, you know, I'm actually a guest in the United States. I'm not from here originally, so I have kind of a different perspective on this. I'm also a man, so I see things from that perspective. But it is evident to me that there is just like a difference in opportunities. There's a difference in comfort level. Like, you know, as something as simple as some people feel more comfortable with their own body, with being in public, other people feel less so. And I think that these are things that are driven partially, I think, by gender. So I would say, Alessandra, absolutely there is. And it's such a complicated issue, and I don't claim to be an expert on it. But I think it's become really apparent to me that in the US, there is just a lack of gender equity. Yes.
No, thank you. I mean, I would have to agree with you. I very much like the response that you gave. That's very true. Well, thank you so much for that. Grant, do you think we will ever have perfect gender equity in our country?
I would definitely say it has to go back to the point of what Julia had said, how equity does lead to equality. Equity is, of course, measured, and when thinking about like gender equity, it's measured by comparing outcomes for men and women in areas of education, employment, wages, participation, and health. And also we have taken into consideration that there's an intersection in racial equity that goes into gender equity. We have to think about health equity as well. And so if we just say, okay, how do we make a perfect society where we have gender equity? We have to also intersect racial equity and health equity into it, because of course we can talk about what does equity look like for a trans woman, but then if we dive deeper, what does the health outcomes look like for a Black trans woman or for a Latinx trans woman? So I feel like in order to reach a perfect society of gender equity, we also have to bring in those different intersections of health and race.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to turn my mic back on, but that's very true. You guys are like killing it with the responses. Like you're giving like very thought out responses. So I really appreciated that, Grant. That was very, very true. Hale, do you think there are unreasonable standards for different genders?
Yeah, I do think there are unreasonable standards. I think that, you know, I could kind of touch on like the traditional gender roles with this question. You know, women are typically thought to be like maybe subservient to like their male counterparts, and we still have to like burden a lot of emotional work, and I think that they're definitely unequal. But gender equity definitely would level the playing field, which is why it's so important.
Well, yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Honestly, I mean, from my personal standpoint, I, especially being an actress in the Hollywood scene, have very much been taken back at like how unreasonable beauty standards can be. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, how many of you guys follow me, whatever, but I struggled with a bad eating disorder that I still struggle with to this day. It never goes away. But it all stemmed from like just not feeling enough, right? So when you're an actor, like not feeling, sometimes you're too skinny or you're too big for a role or you're too Latina or you're too white or you're not a certain, you know, so it's very hard, especially as, I mean, I'm sure we all have our own struggles, but me personally as a woman, I've definitely delved into that whole hardship of trying to fit the mold. And I think we have a long way to go, but we're definitely starting to celebrate all types of beauty, which I'm very happy about. So I'm very looking forward to hearing from everybody about this. But Sid, have you ever had experiences that made you feel as though you were being treated differently because of your gender and how you identify and why?
Yes, so I definitely think I've had experiences where I am treated differently because of my transgender identity. However, I think due to, again, traditional gender roles, I have had a lot of privilege considering that I am, one, white, and two, that in the trans community, I'm considered what's known as passing. So that means that because I medically transitioned at a young age, which means that I took testosterone when I was 14. So I have like facial hair, I have a lower voice. So societally, I look male, so I'm able to pass. However, for a lot of transgender, gender nonconforming folk, that's not the case for them because, you know, they want to express their gender identity or gender expression the way that they would like to most, but because of the strict gender roles that we have, many times they are misgendered because of that. So I think that I have had experiences, definitely not as much as some of my other fellow LGBTQ plus community members.
That is very true. And I'm happy I'm getting like an education about that while we're talking about this, because you bring up a very, very good point. Safa, what about you? Can you share a negative experience that you've had or that has occurred due to your gender and how you identify?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So, for me, being in high school, there's always just like stigmas around that, and like in a school setting, like male students would like kind of drive that competition, like try to be better than you or try to mansplain. I'm sure you guys heard that term before. So I think that's also, but from my family perspective, my grandma has faced like a lash and from her family of you shouldn't go to school because you're like a girl, like you have your roles at home. So I think that's like opened my view to gender equity of like how I could combat that in the new generation.
Wow, that is a really great answer. I hear you on that one. Zoe, can you share any positive experiences that have occurred due to your gender and how you identify?
Yeah, well, honestly, the most positive experience that has occurred from my gender is figuring out what my gender is. It took me 24 years to do just that, and I realized just this past April that I am gender fluid. And I struggled with gender for a while growing up. I never really felt like I fit into traditional womanhood, and I kind of blamed myself for that. And I thought that, you know, me not feeling comfortable, you know, acting like a woman meant that there was something wrong with me, and then that deteriorated my mental health a lot. But once I was finally able to understand what my gender is and then find language for it, that was such a huge weight off my shoulders and such a breath of fresh air, because it gave me permission to truly act and dress exactly like who I am and not try to fit myself into a certain gender role or stereotype anymore, and to not blame myself when I felt uncomfortable. And so it's just given me such beautiful permission to be me.
Amen to that. Because honestly, you got to think like, right, categories and subcategories, they're man-made, right? So like, who's to say what's right and what's wrong? So it's so nice that we're able to like celebrate everybody nowadays. So that was a very, very good answer. Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you for being vulnerable with us. Travis, how do you think genderless identities are impacted, like those who identify as non-binary?
Actually, can I ask a question back? Like, what do you mean? Like, in like the sense of just like the grand scheme of like the US, or like
just I'm not too sure. I'm following the script. So in general, I don't.
I would say that that's kind of like heavy.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's actually a really important question. It's definitely fun to figure out. I want to say the right thing. I don't want to. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that this is like very genuine.
It is your truth. So whatever your truth is, you know.
I think it's challenging. I think it's necessary. I think it is not easy because, again, the world around us is built to think binarily. So, like, it's very, sometimes it can be very restricting, but there's also like a lot of power that you can find in being in the sort of like non-binary realm, I guess you could say, because you kind of get to create and like envision your own future instead of the one that people try to place on you. And you get to just forge your own sort of path. And I think in that sense, there's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of strength in finding your own strength. So, yeah.
That's that's an amazing answer, because I like how you said like forging your own path, because in a sense like you kind of have to, and to be who you want to be. And I think that I thank you for being so vulnerable with us. That is a very strong thing to say. So that's awesome. Thank you. Julia, do you believe there are unspoken gender roles in our country, and why and why not?
Yeah, I think it's more like there's like a lot of like implicit bias, I think, among people. Like, even if we don't notice it, we often do things that we might not realize we're doing. And I think that does come up, especially like in the gender conversation and stuff. So like I feel like I've personally felt that, like where I've either be like in a group project or something, I'll feel like the guys in the project or something will like talk down to me or like treat me differently, and like it's like a very like vague feeling, so you can't really point it out exactly, but I definitely like notice it. And then I'm also sort of like into gaming, and I definitely notice it there. Sometimes it's just like outright harassment, but also a lot of the time the guys who play like the games with me, if I have to talk to them, will definitely be talking down to me.
That I'm sorry you experienced that. That is so like makes me very angry, but keep it to that. Sid, what do you want to cut in here? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. My mind automatically went to how gendered our language is. Like, we don't really notice it, but like, especially like when I'm in high school and I hear like the introductions of like, hey, like guys and gals, or like, ladies and gentlemen, like, let's do this work today. And I'm like, what about my gender nonconforming friends? What about my trans friends? And at my school, I've been trying to like address that with teachers. I'm like, could you stop saying like, even like, I don't know, I've been trying to like, my favorite gender neutral sayings are like y'all and folks. That's how I address people consistently. And it just like, it's inclusive towards everybody. And like, even our language is something that is incredibly gendered. Like even words like autumn man, or like things that have the word man in it. Like we don't realize it, but there are so many gender roles even when we speak day to day.
Yeah, and I've even noticed, I mean, just to cut in there, like even like ships, or like we always call them a she. I don't know why, but I've noticed like our language is just laced with these like gender roles, and it's kind of crazy. So yeah, you bring up an excellent point. So it's really awesome hearing from all you guys. I'm actually very inspired and touched, because I think you guys are giving me an education on a lot of things right now. So this is great. So to keep the momentum going, Safa, why do you think that genders and identities in the United States aren't necessarily viewed as 100% equal by everyone?
That's a really good question. So I think for me, like I always look at like history and like trends in history. So I think it's a lot of like implicit biases that start from like a really young age, depending on like where families go up or family values. And like I believe they can change over time, but like the people that are actively homophobic or actively racist, I feel like, or actively sexist, I feel like that comes or stems from a young age. And then I feel like that's it. And also just like our country's like deep-rooted systematic issues that always we learn in class today. And yeah.
That's a really good point. I'm starting to realize how much the world is so just like put in little boxes. And I think for some reason, humanity, like they get nervous when there's things that they don't understand. And I think it's important to, realize, hey, we can step outside these boxes. Like, they're man-made. So on that point, Hale, do you think our American history played a role in that? Why or why not?
I think our American history definitely plays a role, but I think it's probably just our social environment, just based on like how everyone treats each other, boys bully little girls and it's like, oh, he likes you, that's fine, it's cute, and then that just is socializing people from a young age. So I would say it's more a socialization than like what we learn in class, because not everyone's listening to our American history.
You make such a good point, because every time I would come home from school and I'd be like, so-and-so picked on me. Oh, well, he just likes you. And it's like, no. Let's not enable that behavior. I feel that. So Travis, why do you think some people still may have those views today?
I think it's easier to kind of go along with the trend. I think it's harder to actually make your own opinions and actually live by your own values than it is to just sit by and just say like, oh, this is what my mother did, this is what my father went through, okay, that's what I'll do now. So I think it's just about like the mindset of just like generations as a whole. Yeah.
And it's kind of up to us, like it is your responsibility to become more empathetic than the generation you grew up in. And a lot of people don't like to hear that because you're going against what they think, but it is your personal responsibility, right? To educate yourself and to evolve as a society. So Grant, how do other factors like race affect gender equity? Anybody else want to take a stab at that? I don't know where Grant went. Faisal, what are some steps we can take to work towards gender equity?
I generally think of this as two different kinds of things that you can do. Number one is sort of legislative changes that can be made, whether that's in law, but I also think of like company policies and things that you can change on just like things that are written in black and white that can affect gender equity. So for instance, paid maternity leave and paid leave in general would be a really great thing. Access to, and these things need to be codified in law. You can't just have people try to like do them on an individual basis. Unfortunately, you need governments and you need leadership to step in for a lot of these things. But that obviously starts from kind of activism and demanding that from people in power. So there are those sorts of changes. And then there is individual actions. And I want to emphasize, I think those are important, but I don't think that they are enough. But I think individually, the things that we can do are, as has been said, educating ourselves and also personally looking for opportunities where you can work to be an agent of positive change rather than sort of adding to the problem. So for instance, looking at your own, if you're someone who makes hiring decisions, looking at your own hiring practices, if you're someone that is working in a group, looking at who you might be prioritizing versus not prioritizing, whatever you do, basically, you can put this spin on it, and that can in itself be really powerful. And I think Grant will probably share a lot more with us in a second about the race aspect of it. But I think a lot of people realized this summer, because in the United States, there was this sort of awakening, I would say, after the Black Lives Matter movement got a reinvigoration of how important race is and how important that we individually kind of think about what we do on a day-to-day basis, because I would say it's not enough to just believe these things in the abstract. You actually have to put some application into your real life and how you do things. And so that's kind of, I would say, I think there's sort of the big picture legislative, black and white things you could change. And then there's also individual actions everyone needs to take. And
wow,
should
that was such a concise answer. And you're right. After that Black Lives Matter like new wave, like I actually took it upon myself to journal and to be like, where were there instances where I could have been better? Where was my, you know, white privilege so ingrained? Because that's part of the work, right? You have to like look at yourself and realize that, hey, you're not exempt from this. We've all been trained these toxic things from young ages. So thank you for that response. Grant, do you want to cut in here and talk about factors like race with gender equity?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I would ask everyone to do is to read The Gender Disadvantage by Heartland Alliance. That's something that discusses the intersection of gender and poverty. And that kind of goes into, of course, like the socioeconomics of what equity is. When we look at various things that are inequitable. For me, living in Austin, when COVID had hit, we had a huge issue with health inequity, digital inequity. Digital inequity meaning getting resources out to students to help them defeat those technological challenges of being in school during the pandemic. And so when thinking about gender equity and thinking about me as a person, looking at racial equity, and of course, like what does health equity look like for me as well? Just tapping into equity is just a lot to unpack because there's so much to discuss regarding solutions or collaborations. And so to achieve a sense of equity, whether it's like in a workplace or at school or even with your friends or out, it's always good to just set just have that conversation about what is equity and how can we define it. And then that is a way to not only create a strategy to achieve equity, but you have a group of people that you now mobilize that now understand what equity is. And then you could talk to them about gender equity and racial equity, because to throw all of the equities and isms and everything else at them is a lot. So it's good to mobilize people one step at a time with what equity is. And of course, looking at those intersections. For me, I've always loved the concept of intersectionality, because it just dives deep into the different transgressions that we have as people of color or LGBTQ people with multiple identities, or as I like to call, seasonings to ourselves. So it's very interesting and beautiful just to look at, me as a Black non-gender fluid man, is just what are we doing in life? How are we doing it? And then what are the transgressions that come with me with these multiple identities? So yeah.
I love that. Thank you. That gave me a lot to unpack, and I will definitely be checking out that book for sure. Zoe, I want to hear from you. Do you have anything to add to this?
Well, first of all, I'm really happy to hear that Grant is also gender fluid. Gender fluid peeps unite. Woo! It's always so great meeting other people with your same identity, out in the world, especially when your identity is not something that's frequently talked about. And that's definitely something that I'm really happy that we're having this conversation because and that the fact that we're including so many LGBTQ voices in this conversation as well, because I feel like the topic of gender equity is often just very binary, very, men and women should have equal rights, but then it embraces the entire rest of the potential gender spectrum, and it's so wide and vast, and some people can connect, partially with womanhood, but not fully, like me, and that's okay. So it's really just very important to include those LGBTQ voices and make sure that this topic is, not just binary and really has all types of people in mind.
100%. As well, Sid, what have we done and that are positive steps in the direction of gender equity, in your opinion?
So many. There have been lots of great things that have happened. I think just for one, acknowledging the spectrum of gender, I've seen it so much more now, and I think that's definitely a first step. Having conversations with your loved ones and having conversations with your friends that these male and female rigid boxes that we have are not the only options anymore. There is a beautiful, beautiful spectrum of gender that is just so amazing, and just watching the way people express their gender identity through gender expression unfold is amazing. I'm going to shout out Alok Manan. They are a wonderful, wonderful LGBTQ plus activist, and they post these little like book reports where they read books about gender identity, and then they post little almost like annotations of them. And so if you're ever like wanting to learn more about like decolonizing gender and having those conversations, that's definitely a place to go. If you know Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye, they did a podcast with Alok, and that episode is amazing and really gets into the topics of gender. So I think it really just starts from having those conversations and having the people around you understand the spectrum that gender has now.
Wow. Well said. You got snaps. Faisal, what about you? What could you do to ensure we're working towards a future about absolute gender equality?
So are you asking me personally or people in general?
You know what? If you want to answer it personally or about people in general.
Sure. I think there's sort of it depends on who you are. Like, you know, everyone has different ability to kind of enact change, and so I would say that number one, you shouldn't feel like you have to fix all the problems in the world, and I certainly try to remind myself of this because every time I hear about a new issue, especially related to gender, because it's one of those things that's very sort of important to me, it can feel overwhelming at times because I'm starting to think, oh my God, how am I going to ever like get rid of this issue and that issue? And I only heard about it yesterday and now I have to fix it. And so I think it's really important that people remind themselves that, you know, the onus is not on you only, but at the same time, like I said, I think one of the most powerful things is individual people kind of taking actions all the time, like making it a habit, because it's so easy to get caught up in some sort of a trend for a few weeks, a few months even, because it seems fashionable or just because you really care about it in the moment. But if you don't actually make it a habit, and I obviously speak to myself too as I say this, you have to, if you don't make it a habit, it's just not going to translate into real change. And you actually have to change the way that you act on a day-to-day basis. And those are the actions, I think, that are most important. And so whatever issue it is, you have to decide, what am I going to do from now on for the rest of my life or until I learn to do better to fix this thing. And so that's why you have to be kind of selective. Like, you know, you cannot take on everything, but at the same time, the things that you do take on, you have to be committed to them. And the things that you choose to not take on so much, still be aware of them. You know, it's good to always keep educating yourself. So yeah, I just think it's important to find a middle ground where you're able to make the most positive change in the world on a daily basis without overwhelming yourself. Because I think that it's easy to fall into a pit of despair. And you have to kind of avoid that. We all have to keep going in life in order to do things. So yeah, I think that's important.
I really like your answer because I find that sometimes I get that way as well. And it is important to, like, you know, you can't solve every problem overnight, and that's a good thing. But it's a good thing that we all, you know, care enough about other people that we would like to, you know. So we are unfortunately running out of time. But I want to ask the whole panel one final question. Has this conversation helped you break open your echo chamber? And what are you taking away from tonight? How would you like to start off?
I'm trying to run through the whole panel now. I really liked what Travis spoke to. And I deal with gender equity mostly from like the menstrual health equity kind of field. So I think I need to, and even what Sid was talking about too, I think I need to maybe look into some of that book that y'all recommended and just learn more about decolonizing gender specifically.
Would anybody else have anything more to say?
Yeah, I can say something real quick. I loved the conversation about like setting those goals that can be achievable for activism. That had me think about a lesson that my grandma actually told me about setting systems versus setting goals. And to set systems in place so you could achieve those specific goals, not overnight, but over time, whether they're short-term or long-term. You have a system or routine in place that will help enhance or increase your skill set or your mindset or your experience as a person, to learn how to decolonize or how to mobilize or how to strategize to create that impact or that change. And so that's what I just want to add it in. And that's what I'm kind of taking away, is like systems over goals, and a sense of activism and creating that sustainable change that can always be, that can hold people and be retainable.
Also, I want to apologize. I said something before, hey, all you guys, and I didn't call you guys y'all. So I'm sorry about that. I need a little education on how to, with the room. So does anybody else have anything they want to share? Anyone?
Something that I took away is that activism does not need to be like this big sort of like explosion of like change. It can be internal. You can find the activism within yourself and find things that you need to change about yourself. And that can sometimes, infect is not the word that I'm thinking about, but I'm gonna go with that. Infect others around you to change their ways and think about the way that they think about things and decolonize themselves and so on and so forth.
Well said. Nobody else has anything to share?
I'll say one thing. Zoe, you talked about it very briefly, but you talked about finding your gender, and that was such a really cool thing to hear that someone had gone through, because for me, I think I've never really questioned it so much, and I think that it's a really beautiful thing that you were able to kind of come with this sort of internal struggle, come to some clarity. And I thought that was really cool to hear. I just wanted to thank you for sharing. That was something I didn't expect to hear today, but it was really cool.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I really, really appreciate that. And it makes a lot of sense that you haven't really questioned your gender before. And I really didn't before, like this past year, because, we're taught such rigid gender roles and expectations, and we're taught not to question them. We're taught that's the absolute truth. So it's such a revelation when you realize that there can be more than that, But I really appreciate your comment. That was very sweet.
I'm just so impressed with this conversation. Everybody, you guys are all beautiful, beautiful souls inside and out. And I'm just so happy that you guys, y'all had me here to mediate the conversation. So.
Wow. I know I'm so overwhelmed by this conversation. I was backstage and I was just like, everyone is so amazing. I personally feel so educated, and I know everyone else in the comments section is too. You have all been getting so much love. So thank you for such an incredible conversation. And our conversation doesn't end here. So hop into our community so we can continue these awesome conversations and take action in the hopes of eventually having gender equality. So thank you all so much for being a part of the panel tonight. And unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to you, and we're going to transition into a little Q&A with Alessandra. So bye, guys. Everyone, oh my gosh, I'm doing it too. It's all about education and learning here. We love it.
I'm so sorry for the part. I should have said y'all.
I'm learning too. We're learning. Everyone's
learning. I'm a millennial. I need to learn more.
That's the most important part, is, educating yourself and just learning and not being afraid to ask questions. That's how we take action. I think that's the positive.
That's my thing. I never want to offend anyone. So if I accidentally do, that's like the worst feeling for me. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm the exact same way, but I think it's so awesome that everyone is helping us educate, and that's the most important part. So It's so awesome.
What an educated group of people. Everybody's answered. Okay,
unbelievable. It's definitely overwhelming. So how are you feeling after this conversation?
I feel a little dumb. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like there's a lot of things that I want to learn / unlearn. I mean, even something as simple as, you know, talking to a whole group of people and saying, you guys, like, that's so just confining to one gender, and you don't even realize that you're doing it. And but just hearing how well spoken these young people are, it's just incredible. And it makes me like want to do a better job and educate myself more, you know. I don't know, I feel like a little bit like, whoa, just got a lot of information at once, but it's good kind of information, just gotta digest it, you know?
Yeah, I feel the same way 100%. Did you have any key takeaways from from what you've already shared, hearing from so many perspectives tonight? Did anything jump out at you that you're taking away after this conversation?
You know, because I've heard of, you know, gender fluidity and, you know, non-binary, but I don't think I ever like actually really understood until talking to this group of young people, because wait a minute, just reducing everybody to guys and girls, you know, what about everybody else? And how lonely and hurtful that must feel to not be included with a gender that you personally identify with. So I think that's how I broke my echo chamber today. I honestly think that it wasn't even something I consciously thought about, you know, like in my brain, like everything was so small. And now I'm like, wait a minute, you know, like I'm not like ignorant. I've heard about these things, but to actually talk to a panel of young people that are like, hey, you know, like I'm gender fluid and this is how I identify. Like it's very different. So I loved the conversation today. I was soaking up all the information like a sponge. So
and what do you think we can do as a society to work towards overall gender equality?
You know, I'm not really sure what the right answer is. I'm actually kind of afraid to speak on these topics because I don't ever want to say the wrong thing. I know how I personally feel and as a woman, and I feel like there's been many opportunities where I've just been silenced or told that I'm wrong. Or, I mean, something as simple as like being in a family where you're the oldest daughter, right? And my younger brother like would say something and everybody would agree with him, but I'm the oldest and I would say something and my parents would be like, you're wrong, like, shh. You know, and that's how I noticed it in my personal life. And again, I don't have any fantastic stories like the young people on this panel, but I'm not sure what the right answer is. But I do know that I'm going to implement in myself ways to, you know, strive towards gender equity. But I think it requires everyone to do the same. So I think if everybody did little things and, you know, did the shadow work and had these conversations and weren't afraid of them. I think our society is so afraid of change and is so afraid, especially the older generations, of just like being wrong. And it's like, well, this is what was always done. And it's like, well, just because it's what's done doesn't mean it's what's right. So, you know, maybe I've always, you know, talked to a room full of people and guys and girls, but it was always done, but that doesn't mean it's right. So I think just taking these conversations and taking these opportunities and really like trying to learn for yourself and implement these, you know, things into your life. I mean, that's my best answer.
I think you said it perfectly. I think it all starts with education because all you know is from your own personal experiences and your own perspective. So I think education is the first step and just being open to learning and, you know, working on it. Like how we were saying, like guys or you know, stuff like that. Like, I know I need to work on that too. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't realize I said that much. And I think that's the first step. And I think that's awesome that I know, you know, we, you know, had those red flags. We're like, oh my gosh. And I'm sure everyone in the comments.
I think they thought I was an idiot. I was like, oh.
No, what's important is that we're educating ourselves and we're learning and we're working and moving forward. So hopefully that contributes to gender equality. That's all that we can do.
Right.
And let's reel it back a little bit. I want to focus on you. I want to know what you're up to and do you have any projects coming up that you're working on?
Okay. So I'm working on a book right now, and it's a poetry book and it's a loosely based narrative. It's fiction. It's not like autobiography or anything like that, but it is heavily influenced by my experience as a woman in Los Angeles, in heartbreak, and an evolution from that. And the title right now is Wolves and Women. And that's why I said instead of my pronouns, Alessandra Alex Loren. We decided on my pen name, gonna go by Alex Loren at this point because, you know, my name, Alessandra DeMartino, I never felt like an Alessandra. I don't feel like this super feminine goddess. I don't feel that way. I'm more of an Alex, you know. I do identify as a woman, but I've been told that I have, you know, kind of like masculine energy, and I tend to, you know, I don't know. I just like Alex Loren. But the title of the book right now is Wolves and Women, and I like this idea that because I've struggled with my femininity a lot growing up, because I always felt as if I had more like I had more qualities that people deemed as masculine. I'll say that. I do identify as a woman. I do feel very feminine, but I do have a lot of qualities that people used to say are very boyish or tomboyish, that term. And for me, like the title Wolves and Women and the idea that you can be soft and delicate and a woman, but also you can be wild and chaotic and like fierce, you know? And for me to find my own femininity, I tried to find, you know, softness in my chaos, if that makes sense, and vulnerability and it's okay. Like you can identify in any way that you want, right? And that's the beauty of it. And I think we're starting to slowly come into that, you know? And again, I don't face any of the, you know, non-binary issues that people face. And I'm not pretending like my situation was hard, but personally, my truth was that I just never felt like, you know, a lot of my qualities that were deemed masculine. And I like that now we can have these conversations because it's man-made construct. It's not real. So
first of all, that is so amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to hear about your book. You're getting so much love in the comments. We're so excited. Yeah. It's going to be awesome. And with that, where can we stay connected with you after this? And so we can make sure to see the release of your book.
Well, okay. So on Instagram right now, I'm Alessandra.DeMartino because that is my name. But my display name is Alex Loren DeMartino. And I actually just bought the username Alex_Loren. So whenever I get to change that, when my management says I can. But right now it's Alessandra.DeMartino. I do have a YouTube channel. I don't update it very often, but I think I'm going to start doing it with my book. So I think it's Alex Demar. I don't know. You can look me up. But I'm currently playing Chastity in Blood Queens, who is a fellow lesbian. And I've learned so much about playing that character. I love her so much. Yeah, and that's where you can find me. Oh, also there is an Instagram, Wolves and Women, because that username wasn't taken. And that's my book. So if you guys, it's a private account right now until it gets published. But if you guys want to check out some of my writing, it's up there.
Amazing. Well, that's so exciting. I know I'm so excited to get your book and read it. But thank you so much for hosting this incredible panel tonight. You
having me.
Definition of a conversationalist. So you were so awesome.
You think I did a good job? I was so nervous. When my manager brought me this, I was like, okay.
Oh, you killed it. You're amazing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible. Yeah, I just feel so loved. This was really great. And the people, I want to just emphasize again, the young people that talked on this panel, like truly blew me away. Like they gave me an education, and I hope I know I have a lot that I can take away from the conversation. So
yeah, I feel the same.
We'll see you soon. Okay, bye.
Bye. Wow. I'm pretty much speechless from this conversation. This was so incredible. Alessandra's incredible. The panelists are incredible. So inspiring. My echo chamber has definitely been broken, and I feel so incredibly educated, and I'm so excited to see everyone's journey who was on this panel and all of the amazing things that they will do. So the conversation does not end here. Remember, if you are not part of our community, all you have to do is text Unify to 1-877-222-119 to join our community. We just skimmed the surface of this gender equity conversation tonight. So join our community right here, right now to join our after party in our video room. It'll be so awesome. We'll have some panelists there and we'll get to talk about the panel and continue the conversation, because we want to continue it in our community so we can take action for positive change. So yeah, we hope to see you in our community, and tune in on Thursday for a panel that we haven't announced yet, but we have one last panel on Thursday until next year, which is so crazy. So make sure that you're on social media with us and in our community so you get updated with all of that information, and we'll see you then. Bye.